Welcome to Business Unmuted, and thanks to our sponsor Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers, representing some of the world's best manufacturers of cars, vans and motorcycles. Check out its website at virtuemotors.com. I'm Graham Robb. I've owned Recognition PR for nearly 35 years. We've got 75 clients in multiple sectors across the UK. They have a turnover of about £5 billion and employ around 30,000 staff. So we're at the front line of the business community and perfectly placed to discuss the economic climate. In the studio with me I've got Martin Anderson, who's the CEO of Lemon Contact Centre, and Lemon is a multi-platform contact centre based in Stockton-on-Tees in the northeast. It has clients in all sorts of different sectors across the UK. And down the line we've got Reshma Begun, who's the FSB Development Manager, Federation of Small Business, for the northeast of England and the Tees Valley. She works to ensure local businesses are well supported and represented within Federation of Small Business activities, and engages with local government, MPs and stakeholders on their behalf. Reshma, welcome. Martin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
There's lots to discuss today because in a few days' time, it's Wednesday now, if you're seeing this at the weekend, you'll have seen some of the stuff that we're discussing today, because on Friday the government has got its what is called FEB. It's a fiscal event akin to a budget. In other words, a budget. And that's happening on Friday. Now, I've been out and about in Leeds in Yorkshire this week, and I was talking to a man, old friend of mine, who's David Smith, the economics editor of the Sunday Times. And I asked him for his view on what the government's likely to do and what the government could do and what its priorities should be in light of the current economic situation.
Well, I think the economy isn't growing very much. It's pretty flat at the moment, and there are a lot of worries. Of course, there have been a lot of worries for some time now about the impact of the high energy prices. Consumer confidence is very weak. Business confidence is pretty low. So I think there's a job to do for the Chancellor at the end of this week to persuade people that recession can be averted and that the better times are on the way. So I think it's a task. I hope he's up to the task. We don't have to have a recession, particularly with the energy price cap, which removes a lot of people's fears about what is to come. But there's still a job to be done, I think, by the government.
And it's a big week on interest rates as well.
Yes, I mean, the Bank of England has not finished with raising interest rates, so we're clearly going to see another rate rise on Thursday. It's still worried about the fact that there's so much underlying inflation in the economy apart from energy prices and food, so it will raise interest rates again, probably by quite a bit, and we're some way away from the peak in rates. But I always say to people, don't forget that these rates we've got now are historically very low. We've had much higher interest rates in the past, as some of us, including you, Graham, will remember.
Absolutely. David Smith there of the Sunday Times. He was talking at an event organised by good friends of my firm, Square One Law, who have an office in Leeds. It was a good lunch to listen to his point of view and listen to what the businesses had to say. Reshma, what did you make of what David Smith had to say about the economy? How do you see it at the moment?
I think there's quite a lot of concerning factors and obviously some economic challenges that businesses are facing at the moment, which is, as you all know, Graham, particularly impacting smaller businesses across the region and across the country, really. I know David was talking about the national insurance contributions hikes, etc., and those sorts of expectations that have been set for the fiscal announcement on Friday. FSB are hoping to see a reversal of that contribution hike, which we didn't want to see come into force in the first place. Obviously, we've had the announcements today on support for energy costs, which are just absolutely surging and continue to do so. So I think there are some challenges, but there are also some help. There is some help on the horizon as well, hopefully, to get us through the next 6 months at least.
I don't know what you thought, but it appeared to me that the energy guarantee was pretty good, albeit it was short term. If it was, I'm not precise on this because I'm not brilliant at energy tariffs, but they expressed it in megawatt hours rather than in kilowatt hours. So the public buy in kilowatt hours, so they buy it sort of, I don't know, they were saying it would be around 21 pence kilowatt hour maximum if it was at like the household, but they expressed it as megawatt hours, so it's a lot more. Nevertheless, did you feel that what they did in energy was satisfactory?
I think there's always room for more, isn't there? I think that the promise of matching the support that was made available to domestic properties being extended to commercial properties is certainly a welcome move. The cap and the support schemes that have been announced for the next 6 months are also welcome, but there are also gaps that we need to make sure small businesses don't fall through. So, for example, any businesses that have signed contracts from April of this year onwards are covered on their fixed term tariffs, but there are businesses that had fixed their contracts just prior to April, prior
Yeah.
to the price hike, in anticipation of the increase in costs. So it's really important that we have a discretionary fund or a hardship fund, or some sort of mechanism to make sure that those businesses aren't left out in the cold as well.
It's a very good point, Reshmo, because that is it right in the detail of it. If you signed a contract at the end of March trying to hedge, and your hedge is higher than the current cap, then that's not very helpful, is it? Martin, what did you make of the government's energy announcement?
I think it's any intervention is good, and it gives some certainty to businesses over the next 6 months. It gets people through the winter, which for many sort of retail sectors is going to help them through that critical time with the Christmas trade. Thereafter, I think it's under review, so it may be extended further. But I must just say, what amazing times that we live in. The fact that these interventions by government of tens of, if not hundreds of billions of pounds, are becoming now the norm post-COVID. I mean, if we go back probably only a few years, these things were fantasy, really, that we would intervene and help businesses so much. And not that I'm complaining, because it's helping a lot of businesses, and it will help mine included to move forward. But I just think we're in very, very strange times, and I don't really know, will the government constantly try to sort of get one up on itself to do a better intervention next time as the next challenge along the road?
Well, the Truss government is clearly going for growth as well. And we've heard this stuff on energy price caps for houses the week before last, and now businesses this week. But on Friday, we're going to hear the budget. Now, we're seeing lots in rumours in the media. Here's one that was in the Northern Echo just this week. It says full fat Freeport could bring thousands of jobs to the region. Now, what this is a trailer of something that's going to be called investment zones. The idea being that we've got a Freeport in Teesside, and that has certain incentives on business rates, on stamp duty, even on employer national insurance, the tax on jobs as it used to be called. And the government is actively thinking about extending that kind of Freeport incentive and making an investment zone in certain areas in the north of England and elsewhere in the UK. And hopefully where we live, we'll get one of these. What is your take on that kind of approach, incentive-led?
Yeah, no, as I said, it's a strange time, but one thing I think it does, and Reshma probably agree with me on this, when you're a small business, when you're able to cut your costs and get additional capital back into your business, often we're looking to reinvest that, we're looking to grow and expand. It's not like that money then is moving out to shareholders and going to make sort of wealthy people wealthier, as many might think. It actually is there to increase employment, to get new technology, to make us more efficient and ultimately more productive. And I think, again, Reshma have better handle on this than me. The small business economy makes up the large proportion of the employment and GDP overall. So when you get that cycle moving, it is helping the economy. So these things that they're doing, like the investment zones, and even things like rolling back NI, freezing corporation tax, for me, there's more incentives, as the word you use, to actually make me grow my business further and employ more people.
Okay, Reshma, what's your view on the prospect of incentive zones?
No, I completely agree. And actually, it not only does it incentivize businesses to reinvest back in their own business, but also back into their own communities, and add social value for the young people in their environment, for example, who need to do work placements, etc. Having that free flow capital to be able to do so is always really useful. It also encourages people to train their staff and upskill their existing staff members, as well as encourage promotional opportunities, etc. The limits for investment are quite endless, if I'm honest, when businesses have got that capital available to them. I think when we've got the opportunity to have investment zones, for example, which is something that you've just shown, Graham, it will only ever put positive positive investment back into the local communities.
Well, I think that's right. Just on my own point of view on it, if that goes ahead and my office building happens to be in it, I don't know if it will, where the zoning will be, but if it did, I've got a project. I'd like to put solar panels on the roof and a battery.
Yes.
Now, I know that's going to cost tens of thousands of pounds, and it doesn't come from thin air. And in this case, it might come from a generous incentive, because my view would be not to take it as a dividend or something, but actually it's an element of windfall, and it would encourage me to spend it on that. Maybe if I didn't have it, it will wait as I save up a couple of years.
I guess it's kind of a policy to an extent of redistribution of wealth, really, by putting these investment areas into places that need that incubation of spurring on of that local economy. This is what that's doing, and it allows you and me both, with having sort of small businesses, to invest back in our infrastructure. And I say our people, I've got projects that I want to do which help coach, train and expand my team, bring additional talent in to move it forward, which to some extent I'm curtailed at the moment due to the economics of how expensive it can be currently just to pay the bills, but pay for NI and things.
I think, Reshma, I'm sure a lot of your members are actually busy squirreling away money for a rainy day, because the smaller businesses, and we are focusing on small businesses today because you're here, I mean, I do operate almost a jam jar system in my business, and my business is like 1.5 million a year, so it's small, but I try to keep it cash positive and have a bit of a rainy day fund.
I think obviously, recent times have sort of stretched that rainy day fund, if you like. Cash is obviously, as you all know, king in small businesses, and it is the defining factor of how a business's financial health, really. So yes, they do try and set money aside where they can, but it's not always possible, especially when the elements are against them, which at the moment, unfortunately, as bleak as it sounds, they are. So yes, any sort of investment area, as you say, Graham, it will just help people to reshift their priorities and maybe bring things to the forefront that maybe would have waited a couple of years, as you say, while people save up for that investment. So absolutely, it will help. Not only will it help in that form, but it will also support the levelling up agenda as well, by providing those areas that particularly need, the extra level of support and the extra investment to be able to invest in themselves and create almost a circular economy and a more sustainable and self-sustaining environment.
All right, well, let's look at another element of potential help. David Smith of the Sunday Times was talking about low consumer confidence. There's been a bit of chatter that there might be a VAT cut. What's your view on a VAT cut? It would reduce some prices in shops. Other businesses may keep the difference between what they're charging currently and what the VAT is, and it might help their cash flow. But it's also very expensive for the government to do. What's your view on that, Martin?
I seem to remember when there was last a VAT cut, and I can't remember, was it 10 years ago or so?
Yes, it was 2009. It was cut temporarily from 17.5 to 15.
To 15 at the time. I remember it being quite difficult to manage at times, just the logistics of it, and that's for a business that probably doesn't have that much difficulty in changing our pricing, etc. So it does come with a lot of logistics, I think, to implement. I don't remember at the time it having a massive influence, not from a confidence perspective, when people going out and purchasing different goods, essentials and the like. I'm not sure that the impact, I'm sure there's a fiscal report on the benefits of that. It's one of many levers that can be pulled, and if it does add a bit of spark to the economy, I'm certainly not against it.
If it was temporary, the other side of the coin is in 2009 it was temporary. When you put it back up, as the subsequent government did, then it creates a blip of inflation as well.
Exactly, and a bit like the energy price cap, at some point that price cap is going to end, whether it's tapered or not. So you're kind of driving off the end of a cliff to some extent. We're all happy at the moment, but we've got to manage how that will be tapered into the economy, and maybe there's a hope that we will consider that down the line when everything's a little bit better. We've staved off the recession. Personally, it feels like we're going into recession. Everyone seems to be a little bit frozen at the moment in time, not wanting to make decisions. I don't know if Reshma's seen that in her customers as well, how they're looking at the outlook. But for me, I'm hoping, Friday, what the government announced and the things that have been announced today just help to push people a little bit further. Think, actually, we've got some confidence, we've got some certainty, we can start making decisions. And once that wheel starts rolling and people start spending again, every pound that you spend is my income, that kind of etc. Transactions move up, the economy grows, and then the Chancellor gets more money and they can spend more. It all starts moving again. I'm hoping they will be wheeling oiling the wheels, come Friday.
Reshma, what do you make of the prospect of a VAT cut?
I think, I mean, I can't disagree that it does feel a little bit like the issue will start creeping back up again once the temporary cut is increased again. But I think I agree with Martin's point that it is very much a case of building back up consumer confidence by helping businesses to keep their costs low and their prices low as well. People have much less disposable income now than they did, a few years ago. So it's important to be able to give them the confidence to be able to go out and spend where possible, especially B2C customers. But also it's important to help improve business confidence as well. So you'll know, Graham, that we do a quarterly business confidence survey at the FSB, and our latest data shows that in this region, Yorkshire, Humber and the North East, our business confidence barring 2020 is at the lowest it's been since our records began back in 2013. So that's
2022 bar is low, yeah.
Yeah. 2020, we'll forget 2020. We just pretend that year didn't happen.
Yeah, that's quite right. Yeah.
and excluding that year, our confidence at the moment, business confidence at the moment, in the last quarter was the lowest it's been since we started recording confidence, and that is quite stark. So I think that in itself is quite telling that yes, we need to improve consumer confidence, but we also need to give businesses backing and the confidence to be able to grow and continue operating to the extent that they have been doing up to now, and cutting VAT and helping with business rates, etc., are mechanisms to do that, to build that confidence. As Martin alluded to earlier, any sort of clawback that businesses get will always be reinvested anyway, so it's not money lost out of the system, it's going back in, but in a different way.
Well, I like that this conversation has been mostly positive first, whereas most media conversations are negative first. But let's just look at two negatives. There is the prospect, very real prospect, that by the time people watch this programme at the weekend, rather than live as we are now, interest rates will have gone up, and not just by a little bit, maybe by 0.75%. There's also the real chance that the pound won't recover very well. At the moment, it's as we are Wednesday, it's something like 113, 114, very low by recent history standards, and that's importing inflation. But what is your view on that? Is that just a fact of life? My view is that complaining about interest rates if you're in business is like sailors complaining about the weather if they're at sea. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's a very difficult time, isn't it? Because normally you will get inflation due to an increase in demand because the economy is doing really well. Credit is flowing because the economy is driven essentially by credit, not really by money, and people are out spending. Then demand goes up, and we get inflation naturally due to an economic cycle. The problem we've got at the moment, as we all know, is it's not so much the surge in demand; it's the pull away of supply with things going on in Europe and further afield. So that's kind of outside of the government to an extent, outside the government's ability to control. So it puts them in a very precarious situation. I think it's clear we need to control inflation, and increasing interest rates are the most obvious way to do that. So we have to push them up. However, that can be balanced, which is, I guess, what the government are looking at doing by then doing other measures to encourage the economy to get going, and potentially things like quantitative easing as well, redistribution of wealth. All these things can sort of encourage the economy to grow whilst raising interest rates. It's a very fine balance. I'm sure
the bank is going quantitative tightening now, though.
Well,
of course. So, what do you think about the prospect on inflation? And then talk about the pound in a moment as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously rising interest rates aren't preferable, but it's 6 of one and half dozen of the other. The inflation rate at the moment is less than 10%, which is lower than was projected for this point in time. So I mean,
it could be less than projected still with the energy price cap.
Yeah, exactly. So we could sit here and focus on the two negatives that you wanted to talk about, Graham, but we also, I think, we need to also try and look to some of the opportunities and some of the positives that actually, everything that's going on at the moment, it is done with the intention of economic prosperity and recovery. We always knew that the recovery period post-pandemic would be more difficult than the pandemic itself, and that has proven to be the case. We didn't obviously know that there would be other factors such as the conflict in Ukraine, but there are other factors driving this current challenging economic climate, but there are also opportunities and there are also positives to take from it, and we just have to try and focus on that as much as we can as well.
And the other thing on the exchange rate, of course, the interest rates might push the pound up a bit, but other than that, we'd be importing inflation because we do import too much. Our balance of trade's wrong. But if we're exporting more, our exports are more competitive if we have a low pound.
there's benefits to both, and it's hard to weigh. But every time someone's doing well, someone's getting hit, I suppose. And again, for a local business, for a small business perspective, these are sort of things outside our control. You've got to ride the challenges, especially if you're importing and exporting. I must say, one thing overall, coming into this week, if you'd asked me sort of what is my perception of the economy, what is my confidence going to the kind of the conversation and things that Reshma was saying as well, I would probably give you a 5 out of 10. I really wouldn't know. Everyone seemed to be sat on their hands waiting to see what would happen. Some of the things that have come out today and some of the things that are coming or being alluded to that may come out Friday are actually getting me excited to an extent. I think actually we're going to have a fighting chance of this winter. A lot of business is theatrical. If people feel confident, they start going spending. It's simple as that. And if we're building confidence, like Reshma said, we can start moving and things will improve thereon.
Well, watch out. The other thing we haven't discussed is income tax. We won't go into that, but I think you might see, just but mood music I've picked up, and also some in the media, but mood music elsewhere, is we might see some moves on income tax, particularly maybe on the higher end, maybe the thresholds or maybe the rates on the higher end. So watch this space, because it seems that she's going full Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, she's certainly having an impact, isn't she? And she's casting her perception of what the economy should look like out now and making quick moves. So I suppose she'll live and die by the sword.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might. Rishi Sunak said it would be a big gamble. The government is likely to take a gamble. Whether we would take a gamble is another matter, but as citizens, I suppose we just got to hope it pays off.
You know what? Whatever happens, Graham, we'll make it work.
All right. Reshma, thank you very much for joining us. Federation of Small Businesses. Martin Anderson from Lemon, thank you. And we'll see you on Business Unmuted next week.